Hey guys, and welcome. So what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion about, how you paint models and whether they be in batch or single miniature. For a lot of people, we all have our techniques and our ways, and I thought I'd just discuss how I might approach it, and some of the benefits of doing things like working on just one solo model as opposed to 50 models or large vehicles or whatever it might be, to sort of, I guess, keep you inspired, I suppose, which is part of the reason why you would change that up or do it, is to keep yourself active and keep you painting models, because it can get tough. Life gets in the way, things happen, and then you don't lose interest, but you get distracted or other things need to take their place. And sometimes in life that's important and you have to do that, for serious things and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes it can just be procrastination or, I wouldn't say laziness, because to me it's not really laziness. It's just you get your mind shifted onto other stuff, and then when you come back and sit down and paint, you realize, oh, I really love this stuff. Why am I doing this more? Because for most of us, the painting process is pretty meditative and pretty relaxing. Not for everyone, but certainly for a lot that are in the hobby, that's definitely an appeal of painting these models, apart from all the other obvious reasons why we paint them. They look cool and everything. But yeah, they can be a real meditative experience. And so keeping that part of your life, or in almost a daily routine, like at least half an hour or so, which a lot of people advocate. There's a lot of those like hashtags online, sort of doing hobby each day and all that kind of stuff, and there's a reason for that. It definitely does allow you to see progression. It's the same thing with anything in life, any kind of pursuit that you do, whether it's it's very similar to things like physical pursuits, like going to the gym or trying to get fit. Mostly the best ways to do that is to do a little bit each day, and you build and it snowballs and you get better and better. That's kind of how our bodies work, our minds work. Our mind will naturally try to improve on things. If you're doing repetitive tasks over and over again, you'll get more efficient at it. You don't even have to even try to be good at it. Your brain will just do that naturally. And so I guess, what are the benefits? We'll get onto the topic now. So knowing that, what are the benefits of mixing up your process and doing these different things? Think of it almost like a mini shock to the system, like you might do in the gym to activate your muscles and get them working. You might change the routine, you might change the weight or the resistance or whatever it might be if you're into, exercise stuff. Yeah, that might be one reason why you might do it, but also just for variety. So I've put out a bunch of my stuff here just so you can see, and I've painted all of this in very different ways for each thing. So sometimes I'll paint like a single model, like the obvious one, like your character here, and then other times I'll do in batch. But even then, I'll break it down and do singles. So I like to vary my whole process up, because what I've found coming back in the hobby after a long time away, now that I'm older and so on, I don't know, well, maybe it's just a product of the times, but my concentration to sit and do one monotonous task for hours on end, especially if it's one color, is really, really short these days. Like, it was much longer. Like, it's weird. You think your attention spans would be shorter when you're younger, but really, like when I was younger doing this, I could easily smash out hours on one color and paint it all. But now, I just don't find that interesting or enjoyable. I lose that meditative feeling, that I don't know, that good feeling that you get from sitting down and painting for a while. So there are definite changes as you get older, for sure, and I'm sure other people notice that too about their own hobby journeys. And so it's good to be aware of that. So when you're sitting down to paint, see how you feel, like, and what's changing, and rather than ignore it, try to figure out what it might be, because it could be a simple case of for you to be painting more or to getting your stuff done. It might be just a simple case of changing up the way you approach it. You might be just doing a technique or a way that you've done since you were a kid, but that doesn't work anymore. And that can also be paint style as well. I've definitely seen a lot of people who extol the virtues of doing like a grimdark style, you know what I mean, with the oil washes and stuff like that, and they really love it, they take to it, but they don't take to the sort of more heavy metal kind of clean line kind of approach. They want to have that more gritty realism stuff. So finding your way through that can also help improve your, I guess, ability to paint these things and get your armies done. So for me, it was all about, the number of models that I'm doing at a time and the type and colors and so on. So by varying those things, I get a lot more done. So I'll start off maybe with a batch paint. Let's say, your squad here, I might do the base tones on the armor or something, but as soon as I've gotten to the point where it comes down to highlights or details or secondaries, I scale right down from 5 to 10 at a time or whatever it might be, right down to maybe 2 or 3 or even 1, because I guess the pleasure for me is digging in, when you lose yourself in those little details and you just sit there, and then after a couple of hours, you've done this nice, like just painting away on the stomach there, you know what I mean? Just like mucking around with those colors and glazes and just, and before you know it, you're looking, oh, that's really cool. And next time you kind of paint, a huge bulk of the model is done and you can get it done faster. I guess you are losing some efficiencies by breaking it down to those sort of levels, but I think ultimately you end up with models that you love a little more, that you enjoy playing with and that look cooler. And so I've tried to move that into my process now. So for instance, I've started, AOS over here, the Blight Kings, but I'm going to do the whole army as, one model at a time, basically. So I'm not batch painting them at all. I'm just doing each one and separately as their own thing. But what I'm doing is, setting up a color palette, a range of color that they're all going to kind of have, but they'll all be unique. So next week we're going to talk about, chaos and inspiration and lore and how you go about like maybe informing your color palette and your choices and the way you go painting. So I'll leave off more about why I've chosen that, but essentially it's just to break it up. So these become my you hear a lot of painters talk about refreshing your eyes by painting a different model in between a larger project, and that's kind of what that is. So I'll throw one of these in, paint it up, and there's no worries about like trying to finish this or anything. It's just a little project that I do in between, and before you know it, you'll have a bunch of them painted, while I do these more sort of, I guess, gaming armies or armies that I'm planning to game with more regularly. And that's another thing too, like isolating what's important for you in terms of model, just aesthetically, and then what's important to you in terms of gaming, if you are in fact gaming, or if this is just a collection thing, then you can do the whole lot of your range in smaller batches because there's no need to get them done quickly. And certainly if you're just playing casual games, there's no incentive to even do that. You can play with unpainted models. I mean, your friends shouldn't disallow that. It's only if you're going to go to more competitive things that you'll need fully painted models. But for yourself and your own hobby, obviously you want to finish these things. I mean, you pay a lot of money for them, you want to see them done. So yeah, I think that oscillating between the single and the batch is really a good way to go. And if you haven't tried that, I would highly recommend it. So that also means you've got to have multiple armies on the go, which is another thing. But let's face it, if you're going to be in the hobby for any length of time, you're definitely going to have more than one army, and I would highly recommend it. I would definitely not recommend only collecting one. Even if you don't have a lot of money for this, I would definitely recommend having, even if you have one army but you just have a couple models like this that you just like the look of, that's going to help this whole thing a lot, because painting one color constantly is going to get boring, no matter what, it just is. And so having those little side projects as little refreshers, so you might do 5 here, do 1 there, you might do a couple here, do that, or just do one of these instead of doing like the whole lot, and just constantly vary it up. So I've got like the single model on the go here, he's getting done, and then I'll go back and maybe do like a small batch of some of the other troops to get them done. Or the other big one is like, how do you tackle something that you don't really want to paint? And that's a really big one, and there's no real solutions to that. So for this big guy in the middle, if you've seen any other hobby vlogs where I'm talking about this, I really didn't enjoy this guy at all. He's not my favorite model. I feel like this really needs an update. It's nothing against the sculpt, really. It's a nice enough sculpt, but there's issues with this, as we all know. Anyone that's been in the hobby for a while knows about this model, and anyone that's a big Chaos player knows. It could just do with an update, and it definitely wasn't fun painting it. You know what I mean? I think I ended up pulling off a decent job that I'm happy with, that I'm not going to hate when I look at it. Because that's another thing too. Trying to muscle through something that you dislike, and I think it's healthy to do it. So I talk about that in my hobby vlog, but I just focused sole attention on it and did my best to just chip away at this, and I didn't do anything else. I didn't paint any other models. I just sat down and said, okay, how am I going to tackle this? How am I going to get this done? And so I would go through and do things like only focus on like one armor panel, and I would just do that to completion, and then I'd focus on one other area. And so that way I wasn't looking at this whole model thinking, oh god, I've got to paint all the flesh on that again. And I would break up the flesh too. So I would just do the leg, or then I would do, just like the knee, or the face, or, just sections and sections and sections, until slowly but surely I worked my way around the model and got it done. And it did take a while, but that was the only way I was going to see this thing finished, because, the disinterest was real. So if I could break it into the small little areas and just look at something fun that I can just try to, bash out for a couple of hours, that helped me. And so, at the other end, I now have a painted demon prints that I can use, and that's cool. So these are kind of like tactics, I guess, to help you through, rather than just sort of automatically sitting down and painting and then wondering why 6 months later you haven't painted anything for that whole time. And that happens. I know for myself, coming back into the hobby and then realizing, I thought about all that time that I hadn't been doing it, and I was like, why was I not doing it? Because for a lot of us, this is kind of like a grounding thing, even if you're an artist, you do other stuff, which I do. I'm a sculptor, I have my own brand. You can see it in the link down there, Blight of Gods, if you're interested. And even for creative people that do other kinds of creative pursuits, there's something about the painting miniatures and doing this type of thing which is really unique. And it's hard to put a finger on why this is so different from just doing normal art, for instance. And it really is. It's a very, very interesting little thing that I haven't quite put my finger on yet, why it's so unique. Because other forms of creativity are just as, great to do and satisfying and so on. But I guess once you catch that miniature bug, it's kind of a unique little thing that burrows inside of yourself, and you never quite get rid of it. Even if you haven't done it in 20 years, it can always pull you back in, you know what I mean? With the right models, the right things get released from Games Workshop or whatever company that you like, and then suddenly you're back in it again. And if you are like that, I would highly recommend finding ways like this to balance your painting process, because that's where you're gonna allow this to stay in your life and generally make you happier, I think, anyway. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. It's about you're investing money into a creative process that grounds you and keeps you happy and sane. It's that place that we will come to, this desk, this little isolated little world, interior world that you have, where you get to be the master of that little domain for that time that you spend there. And it's a very peaceful, meditative place. And even when you're doing ghastly things like this, and when you come out of that, you just feel a little bit happier, and I think that's really important, especially in this day and age with everything that goes on around the world. Having something like that continue and be part of your everyday, I think is really important, and it's just going to have carryover effects into your life. And that's what I was talking about when I was thinking about, like, why didn't all the times in my life when things have been going generally better than worse, is when I've been painting these models. And any time in my life where I haven't had that in my life, there's a lot more fluctuations and a lot more, it's weird. I mean, it could just be me looking through rose-colored, glasses or whatever at my past, but to me, the best times in my life have always been when this has been part of it. So, this time going forward, I've tried my best not to allow this to slip again and just end up not doing it. So finding ways to just do small things, chipping away, so that it stays regular. And one of those is actually starting this YouTube channel so that I can keep, a reason to keep painting. And I would highly recommend that too as part of your strategy. It might not be starting a YouTube channel like this, but certainly like an Instagram account or a Facebook account or a Tumblr or whatever social media you use, Twitter or whatever, giving yourself kind of like that sort of thing where you're posting once a week or something like that, right? And so that you got something that you're working towards to show off. Even if it's only to a very small number of people, it doesn't matter. But it's giving you something to be accountable for, and that's going to help you to stay focused and keep it in your life. And I think you'll just be happier for it. Generally, anyone that's in the hobby, I think, would agree. You just generally feel better. You see these things get finished, and then the best part is when you go and you play your games and you hang out or just paint and hang out with your mates. That's such a huge component of this, is that there's a massive social aspect. And so getting these things done, finding these strategies, whether it be the single, which is definitely I really enjoy just doing like the single model, and I think that's ultimately the most fun, is when you can just pick one model and muck around with it. But batch painting has its benefits. But ultimately it's to be in front of someone else and hang out and interact with them and share that hobby experience with someone else, or multiple people, or a whole room, or a club, or a tournament. And those things are really beneficial to you. So yeah, I guess that's it's gone a bit off track in terms of subject, but it's all relative. These strategies have carryover effects into every aspect, and I think that's important to recognize when you're thinking about how you're going to go about tackling a project or an army or whatever you want to do in the hobby, or whichever hobby it is with miniatures, whichever company that you're collecting models for, or even if it's just artists like myself, or you're downloading 3D prints and just doing single models. It's still that thing where you want to think about how you go about it so you can get the best out of the hobby and out of the money that you invest, right? And most importantly, your time. And I would always remember that it is not just a personal thing, it's about sharing. You're hopefully going to eventually interact with somebody else with this, and that's where you really see this hobby come to life. And I think that's why it's endured so long, and why it's still in this modern time of computer games and digital content, yet these little tiny bits of plastic still manage to stick around and keep us entertained. And I guess that's where I'll come to for my next talk. We'll segue into that, which involves these here and my strategies for painting them, and a lot of the inspiration that's come through actually like listening to old audiobooks of old GW books. One in particular, Eye of Terror. So if you haven't read that before, I would highly recommend it. It's a great read, and or audiobook if you listen to it on YouTube or whatever. But we'll talk about more about that next week. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe and hit the notify button if you've liked it. And I'll catch you on the next one.